Hello and welcome to this special series of Ingram Micro's B2B Tech Talk podcast, Coffee with Women in Tech, with your host, Harpreet. This is a show where incredible women in technology share their stories and successes. Why should a woman consider a career in tech? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this series, where you'll learn why tech is just the place to be for women.
I think now it will let us record.
Perfect.
Hi everyone. Today I have with me Sabine Howest, Vice President of Global Partner Engagement and IoT at Ingram Micro. A visionary and hands-on leader, Sabine is currently focusing on accelerating the IoT market adoption. Hi Sabine.
Hey Harpreet, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fine. Glad to be here. Great
to have you here. There's something we both have in common actually, and that's passion for learning.
Yep.
Yes. So if there was one skill you could learn straight away, what would that be?
Right now, if it's work related, coding for sure. So I started and I wrote some books and like coding for dummies, and I tried to catch up with what my boys are doing at school, but it takes time and practice. So, I'm like an amateur. So I would love to really be able to code basic stuff like for websites. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if it was for personal things, I'd probably like to really learn really well an instrument or something like that, something about music or singing, right? I'm really bad at singing. So some nicer social skill would be good.
Oh, I wish I could learn an instrument too. And God, I wish I could sing. I could have a singing career if I could sing.
Right? That would have been a good alternative to tech, probably.
Oh, well, there's still time.
Yes.
Did you always seek a career in technology?
No, actually it's more a coincidence, but as soon as I put my foot in it, I really knew I liked it. And, what happened is I started out learning business and languages, and I think the primary intent at some point was to become more of a translator and go more deeper into languages. And I ended up, instead of that, working for freight forwarding towards the end of my studies. And that was a lot of trade and international trade related. And, one thing led to the other. I was in France at that time. We moved with my partner. We moved to the UK, and I worked there for in Birmingham at that point for a freight forwarding company. And they had a trading office, and I started doing some admin sales, and one thing led to the other. And I applied for a proper job after all my internships. And that was in a small company in Nottingham. And that was selling supplies and office consumables actually to Eastern Europe. So that was my very first entry in the IT distribution market. And, what I did there, so it was very retail consumer oriented. And at that point, not manufacturing, but really more trading. It was like a reseller, if you wish, at that point. And from there, I moved into different parts inside of that company, and I ended up in something that you could qualify as IT, not distribution, but subcontracting, manufacturing, and everything inside the printing and supplies industry. So that's how I got into IT.
That's an incredible journey from translator to IT. That's quite a shift.
I know, it was pretty bad. So I was... I had my hopes really set high on becoming one of those simultaneous interpreters in the European community or United Nations. And what ended up was my language constellation was too simple. It was English, French, German, because it's too common, right? It didn't have a more sophisticated or less spoken language in it at that point. So the competition was really high. And I had lived abroad for 5 years in France, where I studied. So I'm German, as you can tell by the accent. And at the end of that time, I had really well adjusted to the French language. But, the most important tool that you have is your mother tongue. And I didn't get selected because they said my German was too bad. So,
Oh my God.
yes, and it seems like, how can this be? You're a native speaker, and actually, it is true. It's like if you're a translator or interpreter, it's the language that you have to be super proficient and eloquent in needs to be your mother tongue. And I had studied a lot of other stuff in the meantime. Russian and Italian at university on top of it, and it was, I suppose, it was a bit neglected, right? Or it was just not as sophisticated it was. And then it was fun because at that point, then my husband said, instead of translating what other people say, why don't you just go and say stuff yourself and try and do something in business? And that's how I got into selling in the end. And I think a lot of people in general, not just women, I think everybody after the studies, between what you set out to do and then what you end up becoming, and how your first job often defines your career in the end, is quite amazing, because a lot of it is not really your first destiny, like I'm 15-year-old and I know what I want to do and I want to work in tech. I was not one of those. I ended up 26 or 27 and looked around and I'm like, yeah, you could say I work in IT. How did that happen?
I think very few of us know what we really want at 15 or 16. So,
absolutely not.
yes, but that's a fascinating story. Did you have to do anything in terms of training or learning to be able to drive your career in tech?
Oh, yeah. You mean for I think, yes, of course. Learning itself, yes. So all the time, not necessarily just for being able to work in tech. I think there's learning for yourself, learning for career purposes, going back to school, which is something that I did when I was 30. But I think the pace now at which we're moving, particularly if you look at what Ingram does, far more focus on solution selling and services and ramping up the whole sales, demand generation skills and capabilities that we have, that goes hand in hand with certifications and becoming more technical. So yes, I think for the for specific areas like you'd say security or even IoT, yes, you have to learn. Now, I wish and I should put more time aside to go and get some basic sales, like pre-sales certifications, like a lot of people inside the field would do. And I hope I can accomplish that at least this year. It should be one of those few advantages of the pandemic, right? As we're a bit more at home. But, you have to go and be willing to learn all the time. So I read a lot, and I read a lot of technical books when I get. So I kind of have, an easy book, and then the next one I take is something around, I don't know, AI, or like I said, try to learn coding or pick up something around the industry. And that's how you learn. It's if you don't learn, you stand still, and standing still is going backwards. And the industry itself, IT itself, is far too fast paced, as you put it.
Yeah, very true. And yes, and you have to take that ownership of learning and training. But that sometimes, women outside might think they do not have sufficient knowledge to go into a field like technology, or they might say, I'm not techie, it's not for me. Should that be seen as a barrier to coming into technology?
I think totally not. So, and it is often what people say when you say I work in IT, and they may think, oh, you're an IT engineer, or you're an electronic engineer, or you've studied something technical there, or you're a cybersecurity specialist, or a software engineer, right? And or data scientist, right? So all these technical professions, for sure, they have huge prospects inside IT because demand is very high. I mean, right now, if you're in the cyber market, or even in UCC areas where it's pretty rich around, software engineering and those things, yes, for sure, you have, you're predestined, so to speak, for IT, right? Because that's what you studied. But if you come from, let's say, functional backgrounds, like just business or marketing or HR. There is everything inside IT, and it's full-fledged enough now and broad enough now to offer magnificent career opportunities for people who are not necessarily a technical IT person. So for sure, it goes hand in hand with a lot of specific skills. And if you work inside a company like Ingram, you notice it because you have generalists, but you have a lot of specialists as well. And we have people who work alongside from us who sometimes have to go and sit through 3 weeks of learning and pass difficult exams, right? If you do this for Microsoft or HPE and a lot of brands, right, they require this. But if you are looking from the outside in and you're interested in finance, if you're interested in even IT, there's huge transformation going on and you can do a lot of things. So I think it's a vibrant market. It's a healthy market. I mean, let's face it, right? The supply chain for toilet paper during COVID was broken, but people could still buy PCs everywhere. So, which is kind of ironic, right? I mean, IT is offering huge possibilities if we are able to get more talent in, and in this case here also more STEM oriented female talent. That would be great. You don't need to be an engineer to work in tech. I'm not. I'm a business person who had to get technical enough in certain fields to be dangerous, but this is not my specialty. If you wish, there's enough space for career without needing to have specialized engineering for working in IT.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And neither am I. I mean, I'm marketing and I've never worked in tech before. So absolutely right there. So in your very
you see the opportunities, Harpreet, right? If you work in marketing, you must see yourself the opportunities that you have. You have inside marketing many different fields, not just one in which you can operate, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. I think the potential and the opportunities are huge. So I absolutely agree with you. It's a very vibrant market for any woman considering a career in tech at this point in time. So in your very successful career in this industry, what would you say are the 3 biggest lessons you've learned?
Well, the learning piece is one thing, and you have to have an ability and a willingness to juggle many things at the same time. So IT distribution in particular is something where you're given a huge playing field and you can do a lot of it, but you can also get lost. And you can't just be a generalist in this playing field. If you're given something that is wide, you need to also inside that piece become an expert and a go-to person, but you can own it and you can decide it. I think a lot of young people at the start of the career, they can be either overwhelmed or sit themselves in a niche and say, I'm now here and I grow only, vertically up in my space. Like, I choose a career in marketing and I stay in marketing and I grow in marketing and I become more specialized in marketing. That's a possibility, but you also, in my view, need to be open-minded and willing to learn and go broader and be able to juggle not just your one thing at the same time, but different things, because it's just what we do. It's fast-paced and you're often asked to do more things than just your job and create value by doing not just your job great and well. You're often asked to do other stuff on the side. And if you have the right attitude to take this as a learning experience versus thinking that you're always paying forward, which we are, right? But then I think you're getting ahead, because what you're doing is you're enriching yourself and you have more assets to you than what is just actually your normal occupation. Let's put it like this, and that helps. So learning for sure, being able to do tangent projects, I think is one thing. Another big thing is mobility. And I would put mobility above ability of speaking languages. We have plenty of situations of careers and possibilities where people can move. And yes, of course, in some geographies or countries, you need to have local language skills for certain specific roles. But overall, if your IT is a very English place, right? Technology in itself. So I think mobility is and also inside geo, right? In the US, for example, people move around, 3,000-4,000 kilometers, and it's you're still in the same country, but you're being very mobile because you're dislodging your family, etc. Mobility is another big piece. So learning, being mobile, I think choose carefully who you work for, right? So I think for me, it's always been a big important piece, who my hierarchy is and what my team is with which I'm working, and choose if you can, make sure that you're staying with someone you trust and who has also your interest at heart and sees the work that you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's excellent 3 points, really. And I agree with, managing the stakeholders, like you said, the third point, whom you're working with, who the key stakeholders are, and managing relationships is such a key part of your work environment anyway. I mean, IT or otherwise. So we talk a lot about diversity in tech. Everyone's talking about it. But in your opinion, why is diversity important in the workplace?
I think it's diversity. Diversity is important everywhere, right? Whether it's in tech or, in my view, any industry. And the main reason is that it's creating rich teams and tolerant teams, or teams that are usually more innovative and more respectful of each other, because people are different and people inside the teams need to learn with that and get used to that. And I think it changes how they then react with other people outside of that team. So for me, it's around creating innovative and rich teams, having fun. That's another big element. If people are noticing that they don't all come from necessarily the same background. And I'm not just talking culture or origins, I'm talking functions and, specialties where you come from. It's far more interesting. And I think it's the tolerance that it creates and the richness of opinion it creates is far better. It's better teams. And there's reports and researchers and whatever written about how this creates actually better value for money. But if you just practically look at how they operate, I noticed that the more diverse the team gets, the richer the interactions, and usually the functioning of the team can be far better. I wouldn't say you get necessarily less conflict, or there's obviously a variety of opinion that you bring in through diversity. But if you've created an atmosphere and a team setting that has everyone at ease and trust each other despite the differences, then it's fine. And what it also does, it's diminishing the bias. I mean, we all have, unfortunately, biases, and it happens all the time. Even if you want to do the right thing and you know that you'd like to create more diversity, we're all so formatted, unfortunately, about what we think usually is going to lead to the better situation, or what we fear may be the result of something. If you think about hiring or taking bigger risks, and that's I think that's really where if you have teams that are diverse, you take that fear away because people interact and they get used to each other.
Yes, and then you also bring so many different mindsets to the table, to the conversation. So you're absolutely right, where we have those innate biases or hidden biases, which we are not even aware of. They just play a part in our decision making or conversations. It just caters to eliminating that in that overall conversation, doesn't it?
It does, and you're right. I mean, it changes the mindset. It's also it's also setting a tone for what is right and what is wrong, right? If your team is diverse and if your team is made up of different profiles, not only does this system or the team itself then interact differently with people inside the organization or even outside the organization with partners, it reflects differently externally. And I think people have a different mindset then. You mentioned that you noticed when you went into IT, suddenly there's so few women, right? And if you have a diverse team, it gets noticed. If you have, people who are coming in from different horizons and represent a different type of skill set and are not really what other people expect, because usually they get a similar type of profile, and suddenly they have people who are different. It gets noticed and gets attention, and you get reactions from people saying, oh, I wouldn't have thought that so-and-so from such a profile would have been able to do such a thing. It's very different from what we had before, and it's good. It's a good mindset, right?
Absolutely. Yes, no, I agree. And I really like the point you said about adding value and how this also gets trickled down to the way we kind of serve our partners. And having a diverse team means we are able to add real value to all sorts of customers and partners. Organizations have a role to play in this whole diversity conversations. What exactly could they do? How could they facilitate, or how could they support diversity in workplaces?
So if you look at the gender diversity aspects there, and the fact that perhaps female graduates not necessarily look at IT as the first industry for them to go into after they graduate, and then the pyramid actually doesn't start broad enough on the bottom in terms of there's more men going into IT out of their college than women. I think there's things that organizations can do about that part of creating more diversity around gender diversity in the workplace inside technology. So, we on the Ingram side, we have a lot of executives that are promoting the cause around STEM and making sure that we're connected with schools and making sure that we're able to attract talent and get visibility also. Because, often it's because people don't really know what kind of careers are open, and they may not necessarily think that there's something there inside IT that suits them because they may not have studied, electronic engineering or IT, or they're not necessarily in data science. So the one thing that I have noticed is that you really have, you need to have different answers to this problem according to where inside the career growth pyramid you're looking at. So if you look at how to attract new talent right out of school, that's one challenge to overcome. But then as you grow inside the organization, there are far more others. So for me, like the next step is we have a lot of women inside Ingram that I've noticed. They may be in their late 20s or early 30s, and that's usually when you make choices about your if you want to have a family or if you want to change something in your personal life, and that may have an impact on your career, right? You may look at priorities and what you want to do there. And, this is where I think there's infrastructure, there's flexibility, there's ways of how an employer can accompany parents, actually, and in particular, in this case, the women inside this relationship, to ensure that just on the logistics aspect, career doesn't get put aside, right? And if it's a choice, it's totally fine, right? But what I've noticed is that there's really there's an age aspect where it's super hard for women to even fathom that they could have children in parallel to their current pace of career, and they feel like, oh, I can't have both, and one has to compromise on the other. And why would I want to have family if I'm not 100% behind it? But then how much time would I lose because I'm stepping out? And then what is this going to do, like, to my overall, constellation that I have at home with my partner and his career, et cetera, or her career? So
Yeah, true. And that's where I think how many women stay in the tech industry also is determined by how supportive the organizations are for working mums or those returning to work after their maternity leaves and things like that. I think in the long run, how many of us are actually stay in this industry is a lot down to the support we would receive from the organization.
Yeah, I think there's another critical moment, I would say, for women also in the careers, and how you see them progressing, which is the types of jobs that they do, and how that allows them to go and progress. So there's different standards on how to look at diversity, and when it gets even scarcer, particularly in IT, is when you look at P&L ownership of women, or versus functional ownership. So what you also notice is that you find even lesser women inside business or direct P&L functions where they own directly a piece of business, versus you find maybe a little bit more in finance, HR, or marketing, or IT. Another reason for that is that, in my view, and this is for careers, it's important as well, right? It is important at some point that you understand, and ideally, if you can manage a P&L and manage a piece of the business independently, because it's still, even inside IT distribution, but also many other aspects, that's what people look at on your CV. And that's hard, because these kind of jobs where you own a number, a team, you own pressure, you're maybe on top of your pyramid in your function where you are. So you have to be very resilient and self-reliant in many ways. And then you have a hierarchy on top, which will have a lot of demands towards you. And those types of jobs may not be easy for young women to take at some point, and particularly when they go and make choices in their personal lives, because these kind of jobs come towards you probably when you're in your late 20s, and then they grow bigger, and then in your 30s or even in your 40s you have really big decisions. But particularly if they coincide with them wanting to do other things at home or having a family, it's really, you can count them by the hand of situations where you have female leaders who want to take this kind of risk, as in, do such a thing, like be pregnant and at the same time run a chunk of business in this fashion. And I think that's where we also lose, or that's where we narrow our funnel of possible career developments for women, and we need to accompany that. So again, I quote this as a sort of third dimension, where, to your question, Harpreet, at the start, what can companies do to enhance the gender diversity piece? This is another one, right? Because if you don't encourage and enable that people who are kind of at the cusp of two coinciding stages, their career that can take a start, and at the same time their family that could also start, if you don't enable that and encourage that and accompany that accordingly, then you will lose people. They may go and choose more manageable positions, which is also fine, but it may just, not allow them to progress as they wish, or it may confine them towards different functions.
I agree. Yeah. So what you're saying is really enabling more women to actually rise to the leadership positions, and by supporting their entire career journey, so we don't lose them in that part somewhere where those critical moments come, like raising a family or looking after kids and everything. It's not to lose good talent at that point.
It would. And these are delicate questions, right? Because solving them sometimes forces you to go and think beyond the professional life of people, and that's not really the realm of where an organization should go. But I think ignoring it, and ignoring the phases in which you are in your life, which is if you are in a phase where you want to raise a family or have a family, if you're ignoring that, then you're you're just faced with the reality that you may just not understand all the constraints that people are facing. And I think this is also sensitive, not just for the female cause. I often have a lot of empathy also for the man on the other side, right? Because think of it, if they have a family where both are working and then one is needing to take a step back or stop or make a pause, or sometimes they try just to manage it both together, but you only see him. And in some of the cases there, it's also a lot of weight on on the men on that end, and they don't get necessarily the same attention, right? It's still, we're biased, right? We're biased. So
how do we then engage more men in this conversation so they do feel part of it?
So I think a lot of them really want to help because they see, in the end, they see the positive possible outcome, right? I mean, you ask men if they want diverse teams, or in this case, more female people inside tech, and yes, I think none of them would say no, I don't. And even I think sincerely, they would all want the same, because you want efficient, performant, innovative teams, right? So, but they also, and that's the same again, it's not just the man, it's the woman, it's you got to go and get the best teams together, right? You can't also positively discriminate and then end up with a team that is weaker, because you have to choose also capable people. And what it means is often is you have to look for some of those diverse profiles longer. The longer you look, the longer you work, and you hold up empty positions, or you hold up the work and you delay things, and it's weighing on you until you find someone. So also putting harder effort into getting diverse teams can be harder on the team itself until it's completed, right? And I would say men, for them, they're as concerned as we are when it comes to achieving the same results. What for sure has to happen is they have to be part of this whole conversation. So I don't know, Harpreet, you mentioned that you were at this Microsoft diversity event, and I think many of us are going to lunches when we have shows, or you have podcasts. There's ways for us to insert ourselves into these types of discussions and listen and learn what other people have to say, and learn from executives who have had a career, or having a career, or have progressed in their career. But let's not forget the audience of those kind of events has to be inclusive of men, right? So it's not good to have a women's luncheon where we debate gender diversity and there's no men there, right? Because they need to be part of the solution, and they want to be part of the solutions, but you have to go and include them and be inclusive so that they're inclusive. I think it's the bias. I think it's talking about the biases that may be a good answer to your question, because the bias that you would have as a woman is very different from, or can be different from, what men would have in terms of biases.
But I totally agree with you. I think they need to be part of the conversation, and they want to be part of the conversation because they are part of the solution. So it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Great. So for a woman outside channel, what would be the one thing you would say to her? Why should she consider a career in technology?
The diversity of opportunities. Like, you can choose technology and still not narrowing yourself in a particular industry, because technology is disrupting all industries. So you think you may get out of fashion and go into tech, and you end up realizing that there is a fashion industry vertical, or that there are aspects of other industries that are getting touched by technology, and hence there's a bridge into a huge variety of sectors that are, reached by technology. So I would say the one reason why I would suggest that technology is a great place to be, it's because it's still a segue and a disruptor of many other industry places. So you're basically not narrowing yourself down. You're going into one place that has still its arms into all sorts of other industries. And I mean, look at which industry is not yet disrupted by technologies. There's very few. And even those who aren't, those which are not yet will get impacted at some point, right?
Yeah, from retail and fashion and every industry. And to be honest, your area, the whole IoT, Internet of Things, that in itself is touching so many verticals, from healthcare to transportation to I mean, you obviously know more about that than I do, but that in itself is touching so many different areas and walks of life. So technology is everywhere. So what you actually end up doing is when you're part of technology, you add so much gravitas and breadth to your skill set that you can branch out into anything after that.
Absolutely. And it's true. IoT, if you think of connected devices, you can think of IT equipment, drones, and you can think of smart devices on your desk, but you can also think about self-driving cars, or it's really, really, really broad. But on the other side, it's also the functional areas that are very wide. If you look at not just IoT, but overall inside IT, you can go and deep dive and go into a lot of different elements itself that allow you to have very diverse experiences and become an expert in something. So, if, for example, inside IoT, we come across a lot of startups, new brands, as you would in cloud with, we have the Comet Mass Challenge, competitions there for ISVs. There's a lot of startup vendors. You have more mature companies, and you have big full-fledged managed service providers. So the domain of partners and the segments, and by that also the ways of selling to these people is super wide in terms of its range. So I think it's a huge playing field that is still growing, and it's really made for people who are who are keen on learning and finding something, owning it. You can be given a lot of freedom in what you want to learn and what you want to drive in this space, because it's just the opposite of narrow.
Absolutely. And I think in this very current COVID situation, what we've learned is the whole crisis was actually, if you see the role technology has played in this, right from homeschooling or schooling over Zoom or working from home, and so many examples. In a way, it's the technology that's facilitated pretty much the survival within COVID. So, and you're absolutely correct. Technology is so much more than just the tech industry.
Absolutely. And it's a fun place to be. For sure, I know distribution and the channel, and I've been now with Ingram for over a decade. So I would say the ecosystem that we as a company evolve in, I have to say it's a collaborative space. It's a competitive space, but it's also a collaborative space. And I think it's a place where you can go and attain people. You can go and speak to people. It's open-minded, and it's really it's an exciting and vibrant industry to work in.
I echo that, absolutely. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Tons of things. So I try to live by not having regrets, right? So because I kind of think that we are what we are, and it leads to what we become, and there's a bit of a destiny in it, right? I have faith in just how things are going. But so if I go backwards and I'd be thinking about, what would have been the things I'd have done differently. I think I could have gained time, or I could have made my life easier if I had more confidence in certain places when it comes to my career, right? So, and this is, it's interesting because for people who know me outside of work, they probably wouldn't say that I'm a person who necessarily lacks confidence, or if they had known me growing up, I have friends from school still, that they wouldn't say that I was shy or not sure of myself. I still think that once you get into the workspace, you just, it's very hard to figure out what you're like, in caption, what you're worth and what you can do. And if I had known earlier that I could resist certain pressures, or I could have done certain things and I could have dared, I think it would have saved me time, right? And the problem is figuring it out yourself is sometimes taking long, right? So you kind of do something, you notice, I like this and I'm good at this. I think I could do more. You say, hey, I can do more. Okay, you're given some more responsibilities and you cope with them. And then you realize, yeah, that works. I could do more. So this is good. And this is how we grow, right? And sometimes you have people inside your work sponsoring you, or you have a boss or you have a colleague who's able to help you with this and who's able to support you. That's a great story, right? But if I think if we trusted, if I could have trusted myself, particularly now I'm referring to my late 20s and early, I would say my 30s, if I had trusted myself a bit better right from the start, I could have made my own life easier, because there are certain things you just have to dare and think you can do. And in our heads, or at least in my head, I had to prove all the time first. Like, I felt it was down to me to prove things once, twice, 3 times before I felt validated enough to go and say, hey, I can do this. Can I do more? Or can I do this because I've just shown you I can do it, right? And I think this is something that if I had been, that's what I mean when I said I wished I had more confidence at some point, or more beliefs in myself, daring things. It's, if it's perhaps it's being scared that people tell you, oh, who do you think you are? how dare you thinking you could do this, or how dare you think you could apply for this job, or perhaps it's this fear of being rejected and being told in your face that you're not good enough, or you've not proven yourself, that makes us hesitant to be a bit more bullish. And often it's very frustrating because you see your neighbor and he or she's doing it and you're thinking, oh, that's preposterous. But in the end, it's, you got to go and play, right? It's if you don't try it out, then you don't figure it out. And I think I could have tried things faster if I had dared. Does that make sense, Harpreet?
Absolutely. And you know what? Not just you, Sabine. I think lots of women would be relating to that right now, including myself, because sometimes we don't dare enough. We self-doubt, or we are too scared of failing, or fear of failure or rejection, or just fear in general, and then we hold ourselves back. So, well, thank you very much for joining me today, Sabine. It has been a great pleasure. Excellent advice and such a great discussion. And I'm sure those listening would have benefited a great deal.
Thank you for your initiative and for having me today.
Thank you very much, Sabine. Really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone for listening. So bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this special series, Coffee with Women in Tech, from B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. This was hosted by Harpreet Narang. Tune in again to listen to another great story. To not miss an episode, subscribe today in your favorite podcast platform.